Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your co-host, Brian Phillips, the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Derek Cohen, who runs our policy shop here at TPPF. Derek, have you filled out your brackets?
That I have. Texas A&M Corpus Christi all the way.
Excellent. Awesome. It's not community college? But today is the happy least productive day of the year day, when most folks will be pretending to work, but in fact will be desperately trying to find the True TV channel, so that they can watch the first round of March Madness, or as some might call it, March Sadness, because a lot of brackets will be busted. So who do you have going all the way this year?
I did a couple brackets. The first one, and I know this is going to be a high heresy, but I had Houston in the...
It's okay, it's a Texas team, that's fine.
Absolutely. But then I tried to do one with some... based on some other criteria, and I did two separate ones. One led to Alabama, the other led to Tennessee, so it was...
The other UT. Well, as a proud Longhorn University of Texas grad, I am obligated to make sure to put them as winning this year, because a lot of people have them going all the way this year. So at least going to the finals.
Well, you're a Cowboys fan too, right? So you're saying this is the year?
Don't even get me into that. Yeah, don't even get me into that. I'm a 90s Cowboy fan. How about that?
Oh, okay.
Does that count? The other fun business to talk about is happy anniversary, because today is officially our 10th episode.
It doesn't feel like more than 8.
Yeah. Well, and they haven't canceled us yet, which is fantastic, which it just goes to show that, if you control your own production and your own distribution, so take that, liberal media.
Until Greg comes down here and cancels us.
Absolutely. Until we say something wrong and then we get the plug pulled. So we'll see. We'll see how long this goes. I mean, we started this podcast because we wanted to talk about session and talk about all the things that are going on. So, I'm sure we'll have special sessions, so maybe that'll be the extended version of...
That is very bad juju to put that out there this time.
I said the quiet part out loud.
Now you're going to get canceled.
And also this week, I do want to give a plug, because both Derek and I are friends with, we have good supporters of ours and folks that we support locally here at AM 1370. Jim Carl and Lynn Woolley, we were great guests on their show this week. We actually hosted both hours. I did on Tuesday. Derek did on Wednesday. They talk about Austin being the blueberry in the red tomato soup. If that's the case, then Cardle and Woolley are the cherry tomato in the blue soup, I guess, of Austin. And so shout out to those guys, because they had us on this week. And if you missed that, obviously their archives are available. Derek and I were on there, and they're fantastic guys and allow us to talk about all the crazy things, a lot more than we talk about here.
Oh yeah. I was about to say, and not only that, it's always great to be teed up by professionals as well. We're getting there, but that's a different strata.
I like to say that we do our best Cardle and Woolley impression, but they let us plug our podcast, which we actually had callers call in last time and say that they listened to the podcast, so that's fantastic, and they didn't criticize us too much. A little bit of housekeeping. I do want to plug one of the series that we're doing right now, which is, I think it's up to like 15 or 16 episodes now, is called The Layout. And so if you want to check that out, basically The Layout is an opportunity for members to come over to TPPF and talk about their bills. A lot of these bills, which are really important, and they're going to have significant debates over, but maybe they don't make the news, or maybe they don't make the headlines, but it's an opportunity for them to come over and talk about the bills and what they hope to achieve with them. It's called The Layout. You can find that series at texaspolicy.com/thelayout. There's a lot of really good content up there, and you're hearing directly from members about the bills that matter. All right, so getting in, talking about today's show. Later on in the show, we're going to get in depth on the border. There's obviously some huge headlines that have come out in the last week about goings on there at the border in terms of border security. For top topics, we want to talk about property taxes, and then the big hubbub today and this week has been the takeover of Houston ISD. It's a huge issue. The Texas Education Administration Agency Commissioner Mike Morath announcing that they're going to be taking over the largest school district, and we'll talk about why that might be. But for right now, of course, and really getting into the bulk of the show here is going to be our Lege-Land update with Derek. A lot going on this week, huge issues getting in front of committees and being debated, and even some votes this week. So take us through some of the bigger issues that were talked about in the legislature this week.
I'd say really haven't really noticed. No. So, I mean, gee, where do you start on this? I mean,
let's start with Monday, taxpayer-funded lobbying.
Yeah, taxpayer-funded lobbying. And taxpayer-funded lobbying, it's a very interesting dynamic. You know, you see in previous sessions, whenever it would come up, it would be usually the grassroots, the activists, the people who understand like how it kind of corrupts the system. You see those folks really showing up and you know, outlaying the evils there. And then on the other side would be the people who benefit from it, either the lobbyists or the municipalities or, you know, political subdivisions themselves. It was not the way. It was not like that this year. This year it was local elected officials on the side of the bill. And, you know, everything from mayors to council people, county judges, all saying that, like, no, we pay into the system, you know, because, you know, they have, you know, they run the risk pool or whatever the case is. There's other reasons that we pay in. And then they take that money and advocate for just absolute nonsense that nobody approves outside of maybe the six large counties or the 6 large cities. And so if this is something that we must engage in, you know, or this, you know, if we want to take advantage of the service, you know, we don't want them actually, you know, putting words in our mouth. You know, this is the union dues for political work. You know, this is Janus all over again.
Yeah.
But you essentially see that that bill moving as well. And, you know, I know we'll get into it later, but we saw certain entities up at the Capitol really not represent themselves well and got on the wrong side of several lawmakers. So like I said, we'll talk about that a little later on. But see what else we have going on. We had property tax in both chambers. You know, we've talked ad nauseum on this program about how the Senate and the House both have chosen different approaches to property taxes. I still remain pretty optimistic that we're going to see major structural change, and I'm definitely glad to see that.
The lieutenant came out this week, had a big press conference, and announced that their package would give $16.5 billion worth of property taxes, which is $1 billion more than they announced when they put out the budget. So it just keeps going up.
It's true. Now that it hasn't gotten any closer on the mechanism side, and that's where I think we're going to see some a few more fireworks as you know, times
details.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, I still remain optimistic because we're having. You know, we have parity in the amount. We have parity in the agreement that something needs to be done. And, you know, there's actually a decent amount of parity on a lot of the compression discussion as well. But then, you know, whether it's valuation caps versus increase in homestead exemption, that's you know, still the debate that needs to happen.
And it was interesting to see, you're right, that at least both sides agree on the amount, so that it would be the largest property tax cut in history, but as and historic tax cut in the history of the state of Texas. But the thing that you know, I keep harping on, you know, from the communication side, is that people have to feel it, you know, and even if it's just that their property taxes don't go up, or that they go down a little bit, or that they're moving in the right direction, homeowners and Texans around the state have to be able to say that this is real and this is significant. And that's really, you know, when you get into the details of it, it's making sure that whatever we end up passing is something that people in a year or 2 years will say, I'm actually getting relief.
Well, and that is why, and I think that's why it's such a pressing issue right now, because they've been sold a bill of goods. And, you know, I mean, and people on both sides have done this. When, you know, they've sold property tax relief, when in truth what ended up happening was your property taxes didn't skyrocket as fast as they could have.
Right, which is the old politicians thing of, you know, if it doesn't go up as much as we thought it would, that's a cut, which is also very fake. So another big issue that's happening literally today, and so we don't have a lot to report on because the committee is happening later today, is the big debate over the incredibly controversial issue of gender modification for minors. We got reports this morning that the line was already out the door to get into the committee hearing. We're hearing that there's going to be protests from the left on this issue. For those that aren't super familiar with this issue, we did do a layout with Senator Donna Campbell, who will be laying out her bill today in the Senate, and then Representative Tom Oliverson, who both do a fantastic job of explaining the issue behind this bill. But outside of the circus that potentially may occur at the hearing, what do you expect to see both from the right and the left on this issue today?
I think you're going to see a very sober layout of this particular bill. I think there is going to be some cross-examination from other members of the committee that might border on impugning one's motives and somewhat disrespectful, even though the Senate usually is a little more staid in that regard. I think that you're going to see people that have detransitioned appear and talk about their experience, and I think you're going to have the frothing at the mouth zealots basically just casting aspersions and doing their thing.
So that's the people coming in giving testimony at this. I'm looking at the committee makeup, and I'm looking at obviously the conservatives on the panel are going to be in support of the bill. I'm just really interested to see what the Democrats on the committee end up doing and how they go after this issue. I'm not totally convinced that they believe that this is the hill to die on, and that there'll be very much of a pushback. I mean, all of the polling demonstrates that certainly Republicans and independents are on the right side of this issue, but even a majority of Democrats, or even a plurality, I should say, in some polls, depending on what you look at, a plurality of Democrats believe that it is wrong for minors to be going through this kind of, certainly the surgeries and the puberty blockers and all of that. The science, I mean, even if you just sit and look at the science alone, regardless of the moral implications of all of this, the science alone is enough to push back and to do a huge pause on this. And certainly I think public opinion is moving that direction. So it will be interesting, I think, to watch. I talk a lot about tribal politics has broken people's brains. And so if the right is for something, then the left has to be for the other thing. But I'd be really interested to see how much the left pushes back on this issue.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, there are groups dedicated to this as their number one priority, and so them showing up and having protests and all that is not really that outside the bounds. But the issue is debate. You said tribal politics. I just think people have forgotten how to discuss these issues. It's not going to be screaming. It's going to be screaming and shouting in the gallery. It's not going to be come down to and lay out your case. It's going to be, why are you trying to erase trans people? And it's like nobody's talking about anything of that. We're talking about standards of medicine here, which is well within the state's bounds to regulate. And not only that, but it's always about something else. It's always like we're not going to talk about the fact that we're giving off-label drugs used in ways never envisioned in their invention to children in order to basically to match a reality that has been created only within the last 30 years or so. And that's something that, when you say it like that, you're like, well, of course nobody would be. But here we are. Yeah. It is insane that we're having these discussions.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll obviously know more tomorrow. Friday was the filing deadline. Now, inside the Capitol, or inside this, half-mile radius of where we are, that's a huge deal. That's a big deal.
Great meme game by some of these members, too.
Yeah, we saw that, don't come in here asking for your bill or whatever, which actually is a real testament to organizations, frankly, and the operation that you run on the policy, is that, we didn't have to scramble a lot to talk to members about, legislation and reforms that we support, and that TPPF was in pretty good shape going into filing deadline. But it is a big day. It's kind of one of those markers that says, look, if you didn't get your bill in, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to, this isn't something that we're going to be debating in the next 90 days because you didn't get your bill in. One of the big, kind of race to the finish was the issue of universal school choice, which, we're TPPF, so we're contractually obligated to talk about this every 11 minutes. No, but it was interesting because because by our count, I think there are 22 bills that were filed both in the House and the Senate that involve parent empowerment, school choice, other issues involving specifically to this issue of education reform. What do you see in terms of the prospects? Like, what does that mean? There's not one bill, right? There's SB 8, which is the chairman's bill. It's the low number bill in the Senate. It's probably the first one that's going to get debated. I think next week they're going to have a debate on specifically SB 8, but then school choice writ large. But what do you make of, all of these ideas being submitted rather than, just one big bill, and that's what we're going to focus on?
I'd say this is the process in action. This is how it's supposed to be. If you look at the landscape of where those bills are, SB 8, not fully universal, but it does a lot of other things well in terms of parental empowerment, which it's a long bill, and we can go into it later on or in a different episode. But that being said, then there's ones that it is universal, and we are kids can go wherever they want. Some of them, there's that.
Angela Paxton has the bill. Senator Paxton has the bill. I think has the universal school choice in it.
Absolutely. And so there's definitely a lot of ideas floating around out there. And then, of course, there's ideas that, sound school choicey, but are not. And usually you can tell.
School choicey.
You look at the filer and you go, what's going on here? What's up with this?
And we want to be specific as to what we mean by universal school choice. I like calling it universal parental choice, really is what it is. And I've sort of around the building been calling it, no parent left behind, because that's really the idea is that, parents have, all parents should be treated equally in terms of their ability to offer their children the best possible education, which means, we shouldn't be carving out any opportunities for any parents to give their kids, regardless of their current situation. Right. I mean, one of the debates is over, well, what if they already go to a private school, or what if they homeschool, or what if they're in a good school? And for that, I would say, look, there's a lot of parents making tremendous sacrifices to send their kids to private schools. Obviously, homeschooling is a tremendous sacrifice. In a lot of cases, people are foregoing the ability to earn a living because they're doing homeschool. But, even more importantly, for kids that are in good schools, there's a lot of kids who aren't succeeding even in good schools.
Right.
And not necessarily, of course, because it's a bad school, but because they just need different options. And parents are looking forward to those options. And then finally, for parents who like their schools, that's another one. In rural communities, people love their schools. Their kid plays on the football team, or daughter plays on the basketball team, or what have you. For parents who like their schools, you can like your school and still want other options for your child, whether it's workforce training or have them learn a trade or a skill and have them be workforce ready and career ready by the time that they graduate high school, so they can go to high school during the day, and then at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. or after school or whatever, you can use some of that money to then go to learn, to go to an apprenticeship or a technical training or something like that. So there's all kinds of ways that people can use choice, that can use more options, rather than just saying I'm angry at my woke school and I want to send them to the place across town. So I think that debate's going to happen over the best ideas, and I think that's what hopefully we'll see next week, is putting together a package of bills that conservatives can really get behind.
And as you know, politics being the art of the possible, is even the major legislation, SB 8 and its analog in the House, were that to be the one that people decide on? Is that in its final form right now? Likely not, just because of still having the interchamber negotiations and everything.
Yep. So there was fireworks. I think there was some, there's a lot of insiders and folks that watch this program. So, I don't think I have to explain too much, but, there were some feisty members, particularly in the House this week. Jared Patterson, Representative Patterson, who's been on the layout a couple times, was getting after some of the folks who were opposing his bills. Chairman Burrows, who's obviously been over here and done a couple of layouts, he went after the Texas Municipal League. That's right. Did you watch that interaction? And I think there was a sea change a little bit there, that he was frustrated at some of their remarks.
Well, no matter what district you represent, you always have cities in there, and these cities are often represented by the Texas Municipal League. So it's always an interesting political political dynamic when you see how members tend to react to the lobby organization for government qua government, right? And so that's something we've always dealt with. Some people tolerated them. Some people were just, like former mayors or what have you, just, fully in. Like, yes, we need a trade association that represents the city governments, which is just absolutely asinine if you think about it. But that's a whole other thing. But you're talking about the two particular events with Representative Patterson and Chairman Burrows was not based on their position on the bills in question, which were obviously, they were obviously against. I believe Representative
the League
Patterson
was obviously against their bills.
Yes.
Right.
I believe Representative Patterson's bill was about dealing with a delta between, workers' comp and, basically keeping whole an injured first responder. Something that seems like a, fairly politically salient position, whereas obviously for Chairman Burrows, it was in regards to the regulatory, the uniform regulatory situation. And in doing so, it was not so much that in the Patterson case, as he said, these were both things said into the record in the committee hearing. It was not so much that they opposed the bill. It's that they showed up 2 working days before the hearing and then said no, didn't offer any solution, anything, which if you've ever spent any time in the building professionally, that is the most Bush League stuff you can do. That's, that is basically like, people who want to, advocate for the, the golf horseshoe crab or something. So they started an organization called the Golf Horseshoe Crab Association. And then they're like,
free crabs.
Yeah, exactly. But then they show, but like, it's so, and it's not to sound like, the Austin swamp, but the reason some of these things grow into practice is because if TML had a longstanding problem with the bill, they could have approached the author and worked with them ad nauseum. That's another, we saw this again with other groups. Representative Caprileone put out his data privacy bill, and some of the people that opposed that just poofed into existence, immediately prior to. And you never know if you work in good faith with these individuals. Oftentimes, I'm not even going to say sometimes, but oftentimes, they're willing to at least meet you halfway, if not substantively revise the bill itself to ensure stakeholders' input is.
And it's not like there's not time to do that. I mean, the legislature only meets every 2 years. You spend the entire interim. I mean, there's still work to be done. There's still representatives. There is still staff at the Capitol during the interim, and they have hearings. They have educational and investigation type reports that are done on these issues. In the interim, the interim reports, and so what issues are going to come up. And this obviously, I mean, preemption and fixing the regulatory structure in Texas has been something that's been worked on session after session after session. And so then to come in 48 hours before the filing deadline and try to throw your muscle around, throw your weight around is just bad form.
Not only is it bad form, but you had to do so through basically misrepresenting what's in the legislation, which of course, again, up there at the Capitol, so much of what is done, your word is bond up there. And some people just traffic in that very lightly.
That's right. A handshake still matters, and sitting down with somebody and looking them in the eye and having that debate over it still matters up there. The state legislature gets a lot done that way. Very different than Congress.
Well, not only do they get a lot done, but again, the responsiveness to constituent concern is very, very impressive. So
hit all the major issues. We had an ESG hearing, I think, this week too. That's another big issue. We're probably not going to get to today, but that's kind of the nature of what we wanted to talk about on the podcast. Try to get through as many of the big issues as possible. Probably the biggest issue in Texas right now, which is a controversy that has been swirling all week, is the takeover of the Houston Independent School District by the Texas Education Administration. By Commissioner Mike Morath. Now, this didn't just happen yesterday. This didn't just happen last week. This wasn't something that came out of the blue. Senator Betancourt, has been on top of this issue for over a decade now, and he's, I think, the second longest standing member on the Education Committee, and has been, obviously, he represents Houston. So I follow a lot of his lead on this, but and a lot of the reports. Some of the reports that have come out about it make it sound like it's, the reason why this is happening is because one school in the entire entire district has chronic failure. The Wheatley High School has gone through 5 years up through 2019. They've gone through 5 straight years of being rated as an F school, and that was the impetus for the takeover. If you talk to Senator Betancourt, that is one of many, many issues going on down in Houston ISD. Just get your reaction, just in general, about sort of maybe the 30,000 foot. This idea. This wasn't the only option for Commissioner Morath, but it is the one that he deployed. What do you make of the TEA taking over the largest school district in Texas?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know if I would agree that it wasn't the only option, because if you just kind of look at the left to its own devices, its ability to fix the problems that were ongoing, not only was it unable, it seemed to just didn't even care. Absolutely did not even care. And that is what just absolutely forget this is we still have the everyone rating, so I need to temper my language. But we
get canceled by Apple.
Oh yeah, or Greg. Who knows? Yeah. But that's the thing. It's if you watch the press conference yesterday, of half the people that voted for the bill that allowed this to happen.
The press conference people angry that the takeover's happening, right?
Yeah, but if you listen to what they say, it's all about, it's Governor Abbott wants to do vouchers. It's all, you guys don't support teachers. This is the conservatives trying to interfere with local control. It's about everything except the students. About everything except the students. And that's where, even though the people that voted for this are there, rending garments and gnashing teeth, you see them pander to those base constituencies. Again, not parents, not students, but the teachers' unions, the administrators, and and the boards. Because the reason is that this happened is the board has been a perennial failure, and that's why they're actually getting yanked.
And to talk about the students, I mean, even if it is about that one school, that's 5 years of a failing grade. I mean, that's two classes that for all 4 years that they were in high school received a failing grade at that school. I mean, what? Yeah, I mean, what is the commissioner supposed to do? Just keep, hey, maybe next year to get better. And I love how they've made huge strides. That's one of the folks tweeted last night. They've made huge strides in the last 2 years. They're a C. They've literally gone from an F to a C in 3 years after failing for 5 years. So things are not getting that much better. And of course, if you really look at the ratings, I mean, they're still, I mean, they're not exactly the most stringent of guidelines in order to get those ratings. I mean, we're glad they have them, but but a C is not great. And so anyway, and it also has to do with what you said with the Board of Trustees, which is, there's a lot of corruption going on. I mean, I've heard Senator Betancourt talk about it this morning. I mean, there's a lot more going on there with the trustees literally fighting each other. And I don't mean just like arguing. There was like video 3 or 4 years ago of them actually getting into a fight in the teachers' lounge at one of the high schools. So there's factions fighting and warring each other. And so what I think the commissioner did was he vacated all the seats, right? I mean, literally takes them over, and then he'll reappoint 9 new members to the Board of Trustees to hopefully get that going. But it is, it's a crisis down there, and what else are they supposed to do?
But that's the thing. If just keep the bureaucratic inertia of these school boards is just absolutely ridiculous, and without measures like this, they will never ever change.
All right. So with about the 10 minutes or so that we have left, I do want to talk about a different crisis, shifting gears here a little bit. There were a number of headlines around the border in the last, 7 to 10 days or so. One of them being, obviously, there was a mad rush over the weekend. I think it was on Friday. There was an attempt to overrun one of the bridges, to overrun one of the ports of entry.
Red Rover strategy, it seems.
To push, there were hundreds. It was almost 1,000 people. Definitely hundreds, but almost 1,000 people. That the cartels, apparently, according to reports, the cartels had told them that it would be a free day to get into America, and that they needed to go up to the bridge because they were going to open the gates, and that Joe Biden was going to have an amnesty day or something. I don't know. It was one of the reports.
Is that the most implausible scenario, though?
Right. I mean, that's probably why 1,000 people showed up, because it you would think Biden would do something like that. Just kidding. But what ended up happening was that almost 1,000 people showed up. They tried to push their way through. Luckily, there were enough forces there to repel those folks and push back, and the border was not overrun. So we've got that incident happening. Obviously, the tragic incident a couple of weeks ago in which 4 folks from Texas were mistaken by the cartels as being drug runners, apparently, and were kidnapped, and 2 of them were murdered. 1 was injured. 1 was left alive. So you've got these headlines, these incidents bubbling up at the border. What Texas is not trying its best. Texas is actually aggressively and assertively pursuing its own border security in lieu of the federal government not doing its job. What do you make of the response from Texas and the governor?
I mean, I don't know what. Well, I mean, just if you look at some of the proposals that we've seen filed in the House and that been supported by the governor, those are separate proposals. Obviously, want to put a distinction there. They're firing every arrow in the quiver. I don't know I'm at a loss to think about what else can be done, within the current bounds, and even slightly on the periphery, on the other side of the current bounds. You saw that HB 20 was filed, HB 20 saying about basically creating these border security units that might include civilians, and some of the absolute dumbest takes I've seen on that we're creating lynching units and stuff like that. And it just shows that the people that say that kind of nonsense just really aren't ready for this debate. Like, this is a debate for adults, especially adults debating issues of geopolitical importance. But some people just go to the red side bad, blue side good, that base level,
or the tribal politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the reaction to this has been predictable on both sides. I have not delved into specifically with HB 20. I haven't gotten to be able to review it thoroughly. I think that it's something well within the bounds of what the state is allowed to do. But I still, devil being in the details, just want to make sure to take a look on that. Maybe we'll get Representative Schaefer in here to do a layout on it, because I think that'd be, informative even for me, because I'm willing to hear any solution at this point. It's getting so bad down there, and the abdication by the federal government is getting so bad. And we're a massive economy, but it's not like we have infinite resources by which we can use to secure our own border in the absence of the federal government. So again, anything that gets proposed, I'm willing to have that discussion.
And with regard to HB 20, the Republicans are taking heavy fire on that from the Democrats. The Democrats absolutely freaked out over the implementing of that bill, not just because it was filed, but because it got a low bill number, which means it is and it was pushed by the speaker as a priority item, and so it's going to get a lot of debate and is going to get a lot of pressure for the Republican caucus to stick together and to vote that out. And as they say, when you're taking heavy fire, you must be over the target.
Yeah, and I would also say I don't think this is going to be as unifying on the left as they think it is. Because obviously we're going to see the limousine liberals from, representatives from Austin, from Dallas, from Houston doing their usual preening. And I think that some of the folks down the border will be like, let's hear them out, and obviously.
Will this be an issue? You think that they, load up their suitcase of Miller Lite and head up to Washington to break quorum over?
Yeah. Well, shout out Miller Lite, because I think they got a bad rap for, their being an accessory in the walkout. But no,
at least Lone Star. Have some Texas pride.
Why start now for those guys? But anyway, that's mean. Some of them mean well. That being said, I don't think it is for 2 reasons. One, they've actually gone ahead and tightened the rules up around quorum breaking, making it very disadvantageous for that to be used as a particular strategy. That being said, the lack, I don't want to say never, because kind of the lack of creativity from caucus leadership, I think I don't, it is the same recycled microwaved ideas over and over again in the policy debates. Why would we believe that it won't be the same microwaved ideas all over again in the political debates?
And for his part, Joe Biden has, you want to pull your hair out, because within the first 10 days of him becoming president, he reversed dozens of orders from the former, to prove that he was the anti-Trump, to prove that, that there was a new sheriff in town. He reversed dozens of orders.
Or no sheriff in town, as
right. Particularly in the case of border security, dozens of orders that had been put in place by the president and the previous administration, many on border security, many that were working and were creating for the first time in a generation an actual secure border. Now, by my count, this is now the third time that he has reversed a border security provision. This one being, if you're going to try and gain, entry into the United States, you have to, and you're going to do it through the asylum process, you have to ask for asylum from the first country that you step in, which would be, for most people coming here from Central America, that would be Mexico. And this was a policy that was put in place that did actually stem the flow of people coming into America. But of course, this is a retread, this is a reverse, and it just has people tearing their hair out because we've dealt with some of the hundreds, literally, we're breaking records every single month of illegal entries. Tens of thousands of others of gotaways, people that were not.
But we better not let Jokovic play any tennis.
Right, exactly, because he didn't get the jab. But all of that going on, and now 2.5 years later, now that he's in the political silly season, he's got to run for re-election. Now they're finally getting.
Well, you did see his sister soldier moment of saying, the free carjackings bill that had been advanced by Congress in D.C. They're like, if they repeal it, I'll sign that. And I'm like, so brave.
Wow.
So brave. Braver level 9,000.
But at the same time, he's pushing a bill that has almost $5 trillion in tax increases to pay for all manner of left-wing garbage and nonsense just to play to his base, because they're looking around saying, what have we got in the last 3 years? And he's trying to answer that question. But this segment, we do call it In Depth for a reason. And one of the new research projects that TPPF has put out, just for a shameless plug, is this idea, and it's not a new idea, but we've done a bunch of research on it, is this idea of labeling Mexico as labeling the cartels, not Mexico, although some could make that case.
Yeah, they just label them a failed narco state.
But specifically the cartels labeling them a foreign terrorist organization. What does that do? Just that designation opens up some new things that we can do. What does that do for Texas if we make that designation?
Well, certainly, and then to kind of to flesh out my kind of flip remark right there is, the failed narco state issue is, if we had a credible partner in government, again, not even one that we have to agree with all the time. In fact, one that, I think AMLO, we can disagree with on many things. The problem, of course, being, though, that he seems at many times with the assertion of sovereignty of his own country, subservient to these cartels. And so what can we do if we determine that the cartels are terrorist organizations? Well, it allows us, I would say unfettered, but a lot more access to interdict and freeze assets that are coming through places of our jurisdiction. It allows us more flexibility in what we can do with individuals that are arrested and detained. It also opens up a lot of extradition opportunities as well. So is it going to be the silver bullet? Absolutely not. Is it something that's going to be a good tool in the toolbox for reining in these bad actors? It will be. How far it'll go will depend on how much it's actually employed. But that being said, this is an arrow in the quiver that has not yet been fired. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's past time that we've done that.
And the House, and certainly the Senate as well, is making border security a top issue. As I say all the time on this show, we've been polling, top issues in Texas for 3 years, and border security and immigration has been the number one issue, save for a couple of months during the pandemic, has been the number one issue for all Texans, literally since we started asking the question. So it's encouraging that the House and the Senate and certainly the governor are focused on this issue and are coming up with new ideas.
Yep.
All right. Well, that'll take us to the end of the show. Again, sorry I don't have a party hat to celebrate our anniversary, or blowhorn or confetti. But
did you get me anything nice? Or
we did not do gifts this year, but perhaps maybe on our 20th show we'll do an awkward gift exchange. So just let me know.
Yeah,
Like my wife does, just subtly let me know. What you're looking for this year for anniversary, and hopefully I don't screw it up like I do those. All right. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We appreciate all of our listeners and all the feedback that we get on the show. As always, I say at the end of every show, in the words of Sam Houston, do good and suffer the consequences. We'll see you next time.